And welcome back to KTN News Center. Let's continue with our coverage. But just before we get into our conversation, as business operations remained slow in Nairobi and some other major towns in the country for the better part of Monday following protests from the opposition section of leaders and residents allied to the Kenya Kwanza government have condemned the demonstrations, terming them unnecessary. Nyandarua County Member of Parliament Faith Gitau launched a scathing attack on Raila Odinga and his Azimio Brigade for organizing the demonstrations that paralyzed business activities in the capital city. Speaking in Olorok, the MP said Kenyans are not happy with such chaotic scenes. She said Kenyan Kwanza leadership would not bow down to pressure for a power-sharing deal, a statement that was echoed by a section of residents from Nyandarua County.
Yenye inafaa kwa sahi andamane kwake, ambie watu warudi kwa mashamba wapande, ndio unga atisi tukifika mwezi wa 8 iteremke. Lakini hatutaki maandamano ya kazi yenye hatuifai. Kazi zetu tumefunga, watu wameko kwa manyumba, si ati wamemuogopa, lakini tunaongopa kazi zetu kuharibiwa. Mmoja ashikwe, watu wake aende atuonyeshe kazi yake mahali iko. Juu wanaandamana na hakuna kazi yenye wameweka.
Nataka kuambia Raila hivi, sisi tumechoka. Na kama watoto wa Maumau, hata sisi tutachukua spear and the shield, tupambane na wewe, kwa sababu tunajua vile unataka. Every time umeshindwa unalete vurugu ndio upatiwe nusu mkate. Sisi wa Kenya tumesema, hata rais akisema mtaongea, sisi wa Kenya tumekataa. Hamtaongea, hakuna kuongea na hakuna nusu mkate. Tunasema unaita watoto wetu, unawaambia waende wa maandamano, na wako wanakula mkate, wanakula mayai, wanakula siagi, wetu wakipigwa huko.
Now, is it a moment of revolution in Africa? Well, it seems so. While there were running battles in Kenya, other African countries also witnessed similar scenarios, with South Africa and Tunisia also holding protests over poor governance. South Africa leaders from the opposition calling for the resignation of South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa. Clement Masombo has the details.
While police officers in Nairobi, Kenya engaged residents in running battles for the better part of Monday, in South Africa the situation was not so different. The leader of Economic Freedom Fighters, EFF, Julius Malema, had also mobilized South Africans in the streets of Pretoria to protest against President Cyril Ramaphosa and demand for his immediate resignation. The South Africans protested over the rising cost of electricity in one of the countries that run the economy of the African continent. The leaders sang freedom songs as they marched in the streets and vowed to go on with the protest, demanding for a shutdown of the South African government led by Cyril Ramaphosa.
The problem is that the tyranny is running the country and their own movement. That's why they came here today, because we are the only people who are not scared of Cyril Ramaphosa. His soldiers and police were not scared of Begikele, were not scared of the police. The commissioner of KZN, we must take him to court after this march.
Another African nation that witnessed protest was Tunisia in the Horn of Africa. Residents took to the streets on the day when the nation marks its independence, and just like Kenya, the Tunisians lamented over the rising cost of living, unfavorable policies, as well as the recent constitutional amendments made by President Kais Saied. Saied has been in the office since October 2019. In the west of Africa, the leaders of opposition parties in Nigeria had also planned for demonstrations opposing the declaration of Bola Tinubu as the winner of the just concluded presidential elections. The demonstrations were set to happen on the day when the Electoral Board of Nigeria, INEC, was expected to officially announce the winner of the presidential elections. However, the Nigerian government acted by imposing curfews in some sections of the states in Nigeria as a way of curbing off the protesters. And as to whether the demonstrations in key sections of Africa were just a mere coincidence is a matter that experts will now look into. Clement Masombo, KTN News.
Right, now let's now continue with our conversation. Kipropa, I begin with you. There are confirmations, and what you said, that every Kenyan has a right to protest. That was not allowed yesterday, if what both of you have said, it's anything to go by. So what are the consequences for the government's action to again prevent the protesters from demonstrating? That's yesterday. And again, we have reports that property was destroyed. So who again? By the protesters. So who is to take responsibility for this?
Thank you, Purity. I think just to start with, these rights, the fundamental rights and freedoms, do have limitations. Okay? These limitations are actually captured under Article 24. Now, the limitations are that if the enjoyment of that particular right by any individual, let's say those who are protesting, invades into your right as Purity, that is where limitation of those rights may be capped. Okay? Now, there is the interface between enjoyment of the right to demonstrate and the right of movement, right to own property at the same time. Okay, so if, like for yesterday, and I think this was preemptive in terms of what the government did, was to take what had transpired before in previous demonstrations, and then use it as basis to deny the Azimio leaders their right to demonstrate. Okay, now that is where, and I've said again, where the problem lies with the law. Okay, if there was a clear guidelines on how demonstrations, where and when it will be held, and the demonstrators themselves, led by the captain, being able to control the demonstration in terms of decorum, that is where this particular right can be enjoyed by any other person. Okay, so for this particular case, and this is a political scenario, I think people try to achieve their own ends in terms of trying to curtail whatever that is being done, so that the government does not look in a bad way. Okay, and sometimes they are justified because what you've just said in Kisumu, and I think the Governor Nyong'o was saying, property were destroyed by hooligans who were, pretending to be Azimio supporters. Again, you see, you cannot separate those two. It was an event that was organized by the Honorable Raila, Azimio. Okay, so anything that transpires within that particular time will mean that the person who called for that must be held accountable. And I sometimes I understand the reason why governments tend to curtail that advancement made by opposition leaders or any other protester for that matter, especially the political angle protestation. Okay, you would understand why governments using the police to stop such kind of demonstration. Right. But as the law stands, everyone has a right to demonstrate, to assemble, to picket anywhere and everywhere. Okay, so the problem is, how should we manage those who participate in these protests? And that is what my colleague even has captured very well.
And finally, let me welcome your remarks on how realistic are the demands by Azimio. Servers opened, high cost of living, the Cherera 4 reinstated, among others. Okay, so politically speaking, as an analyst, as an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, what could be achieved? What is realistically achievable, and what is not realistic from the list of the demands they have?
Okay, allow me to begin here. When the Constitution gave every Kenyan an opportunity to protest, there is also constitutional mandate for police, keeping peace and order. So how does the police in Kenya and Africa at large understand the meaning of keeping peace and order when there is a protest here and there? And even South Africa yesterday, they killed 4 people. But let me ask, is it within the law, because he's a lawyer, is it within the law that if you find me vandalizing this frame right now, you're supposed to kill me because you are police? No, that is not within the law. So we cannot run away from the conversation that police have done something wrong. Killing a human being, it is only done. I think in Kenya right now there is even nothing like that in court. The court cannot say go kill this one. There is nothing like that. So what about police out there trying to keep law and order? You're supposed to be arrested, taken to court, and get charged. So the moment we have a body lying lifeless, that conversation cannot be pulled into the politics and say, sometimes I understand why the government must do this. No, there is no sometimes in that. It is killing, it is outside the law, full stop. Then we pick a different conversation. Raila, why did you call people out? Because we are trying to justify including death of people. So that one cannot be a conversation. Then the other aspect is, when people, I feel like it is a serious profiling. And this profiling, I have just listened to the clip you had there of Honorable Faith Gitau. That is a serious profiling. So when we want to heal a country, and I have a leader like Honorable Faith Gitau profiling certain people. So how do I sit and look at her now as a leader? I think it is not working. When a person wakes up in Kibra and your estate is surrounded by police ready for war with gears and everything, riot gear, is that not profiling of the highest order? You're simply conveying a message to me that here, the people who live here where I live, we are bad people. We are supposed to be, why was that not in Eldoret? Why was that not in Migori? Why was that not anywhere? That is a serious profiling. So the government must accept that was bad and cannot be allowed. Then coming into the reasons or the agitations why Raila and team are agitating over this. Number one, you listen again to that. Raila is talking about the election which we just left last year.
Right.
According to Raila and his team, there is this whistleblower who has come up with figures and told them 1, 2, 3, 4. We honestly don't know the details of what Raila has and the credibility of that particular thing. But how do we get to know how credible or not credible what he has if we don't give him a chance to sit on the table and say, this is what I have? So if I say I have evidence that you took 1, 2, 3 from me, and nobody gives me a chance to table my evidence and see whether credibility is in it or not. So how do we get to dismiss you and say, this is not possible, this is nonsense, this cannot work? I think it is, in one way or another, we must accept, yes, William Ruto was given presidency by the commission charged with that responsibility, and the Supreme Court accepted that everything was done. But how do we know because in this station, you run a program called Case Files. You know that program? Hasn't it proved beyond reasonable doubt that there are people who have been in jail and they were not guilty? Hasn't it proved that? So then why are we here quickly dismissing that there was Supreme Court? Why isn't those Supreme Courts that are the courts that have jailed people without being guilty?
Because of
so
time,
why are we dismissing this?
Because of time, Odede, let me also welcome Kiprop to again tell us about the demands just in a minute, because we are wrapping it up.
Thank you, Purity. I think just to rejoin of what my colleague here said, that there was level of profiling by the police. I think that is not true. I was able to ask if there were presence of police in areas like Eldoret and these other towns. Indeed, they were there, okay? And I think the police only reacted to where there was some provocation. Okay? Okay. So to say that I don't want to defend anyone or to take sides, but just to be fair with the police, is there was presence of police. And again, if you look at the security matters, there are areas where you, and I've said they have been looking at the history of demonstration, and of course where the so-called the strongholds of these political leaders, and maybe this is where they put more of their personnel. And I think this is where my colleague is getting it wrong, that it is profiling, which I think it is not the case. Now, just to say, and I've said that Azimio or any other person has the right to do whatever they want to do, so long as it's within the confines of the law. Okay? But at the end of the day, we have a country that we have to take care of. Okay? Even if we are agitating for these called fundamental rights and freedoms, I think we must be able to also guard our integrity as a nation. Okay? Even political leaders, we must not take this country to where we had been before in 2007. And if we are not careful, that is the trajectory that this country is going to take. Okay? Let us not look at what Raila is doing as trying to pit different communities or political affiliation. Let us look at, I mean, we can say Raila has done a lot of agitation before. And actually the rights that we are enjoying right now is because of some of the issues that he had pushed. Multi-party democracy, for example. It is something that we are enjoying now. Okay? So as lawyers, we try to accept what we call stretching the limits of the Constitution. Yeah. Trying to see how far we can go. And that is how this country is going to go forward.
And I think we need to pick this conversation another time.
Yes.
Time is not on our side. We have to wrap it up. But
Thank
keep
you.
Prop and Odette, it's always great having your company right here. We shall be back with this conversation on matters law when it comes to demonstrations. But thank you, we appreciate. All right, that's the end of our News Center this Tuesday morning. Thank you so much also for your company. I'm Purity Museo Nzuki. Keep watching KTN News.